This is B of C Live, the video and podcast series of Business of Cannabis. Find out all that we do at businessofcannabis.com. Coming up on our B of C Live segment, we connect with Dario Yaganovich of CanDelta, which is the official regulatory advisor of Business of Cannabis. We wanted to connect with Dario to talk about the latest changes from Health Canada, but really all kinds of regulatory changes in Canada. Here's the up-to-the-minute conversation with Dario Yaganovich. Dario, thanks for being here.
No problem, Jay. How's it going?
You got a new look since last time you were on, since last time I saw you. It's different than it was. I'll let those in the audience take their shots on Twitter if you're ready for that. I like it. I'm a facial hair guy, so I see game, respect game, I guess. Dario, you follow obviously what's happening with Health Canada. Last week, I think it was, there was a series of, I see all the regulatory changes by tweet, but I assume there's a more official way to get them. What is Health Canada changing? What is it keeping the same? What should we be focused on, and what can we talk about?
For sure, Jay. Yeah. So there's been a lot of changes that kind of came about in the last month. March has been pretty busy for Health Canada. There's a series of major announcements that they made in terms of regulatory changes that are proposed or effective right away, and that's been to the delight of a lot of license holders in the Canadian industry. It's kind of a breath of fresh air. I mean, I think it's no secret at this point that there's a variety of challenges that the Canadian producers are facing right now, and so alleviating some of the regulatory burden for these folks has been really great for them. So starting off on March 12th, a big announcement came out via the Canada Gazette posting, which allowed for it was a proposition for some changes to the regulatory framework concerning specifically research license holders, for example, to allow them additional activities for their studies, like evaluating things like onset times and durations of cannabis products, which before was really limited to clinical trials, which is really inaccessible for a lot of producers for a multitude of reasons. Analytical labs can also potentially produce reference standards and test kits. They're proposing to amend the requirements for the head of laboratory for analytical licenses, and as well the cannabis beverages. They're amending the equivalency factors that are associated with them, so that folks can now carry out of a store more beverages than they would in the past, which was notably limited. So that's really big, obviously, for retailers, producers in general. So that's been good. Another announcement came on March 30th by way of a note to all the existing license holders that Health Canada plans to extend their COVID-19 measures to September 30th of 2023. So that's 18 months, actually, over a year and a half, pretty much, to give them a little bit more flexibility to do things like witness destruction virtually, or have some flexibility on their packaging date with plus or minus 4 days, and conducting activities like quality assurance activities, sales, record keeping, and other things off-site, which has been very helpful for a lot of producers. And so it's nice to see that they've extended that even further. The one that we're talking about mostly today, though, it came on the day after that, on March 31st, which was Health Canada announced to all existing license holders, and moving forward for any new applicants, that they, for specifically for a processing license, that they have decided to completely eliminate the sales amendment process for dried cannabis and fresh cannabis. So that's been huge. I mean, especially for micro processors and smaller companies, the sales amendment process has always been a huge regulatory burden for a lot of them. Once you get your license, you've gone through so much to get to that point. Now you also have to, you're limited in what you can sell until you can get that authorization to sell your products directly to the provinces. And so going through the sales amendment process has been a huge challenge for a lot of folks, and there haven't been a significant number of processors who've even achieved it on the micro level, at least. So by doing this, I think a lot of hopefuls have had a breath of fresh air that to say that, now Health Canada had decided that they're going to amend every processing license, micro or standard, out there within the next 90 days to basically give them right away the authority to sell dried cannabis and fresh cannabis products, finished products, to medical channels, to consumers through the provinces. And so basically you're going to have prioritization of anybody any producers that are currently in the queue for their sales amendment. So they're going to get theirs first, and we've already seen that in play. And then within the next 90 days, everyone is going to be amended to allow for that.
It seems like a big deal. I feel like we've spent time talking about the sales amendment as being the final regulatory burden, which means if you don't have it, you were really forced. You had to sell it to other producers who had a sales amendment, right? So like there was a way to get your product to market. It just wasn't direct. And every time it's not directed, it eats at your bottom line, presumably. And so I guess the flip of that is, so now this regulatory burden has been lowered or taken away. There will be these new processors that don't need a sales amendment that actually have product to sell directly through channels. Like, does that mean it's going to be like the regulatory burden is down, but does that make the job for like Ontario Cannabis Store that much more complicated to find people to buy cannabis from? Because presumably some of these people are micros and they won't be able to fulfill these huge orders that OCS wants, but may have really interesting products for consumers and retailers may really want. Like, so does it, I mean, I know the regulatory burden comes down, but does it create an operational challenge for provinces who are the distributor and wholesaler?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jay. I think there's always been a big challenge even after you get your sales amendment. That's not even the final regulatory burden. Now you have to deal with the provinces and getting into the provinces, and then like you mentioned, for the smaller companies, getting your product, even if you become a registered vendor, like getting your product to be carried by the OCS or one of the other boards, the provincial boards, is quite a challenge. You have to really set your product apart from the others. There has to be a need for that product currently. So there is a lot of challenge that folks face with that. And, the OCS will now have, a lot more, obviously, applicants that are going to be coming in to offer their products. But the good thing that this is signaling is it's kind of a larger topic here that we're seeing. It started on the provincial level with the OCS starting to create some additional pathways to, like, the flow through program to allow for more products to be accessible through some of the smaller producers, right, and give them more of an opportunity. These regulatory changes from Health Canada now, obviously Health Canada at the federal level, they're a little bit slower to roll things out, but to see these kinds of changes happen all within the span of a month, I think, hopefully, I would assume it's indicating, a greater awareness that Health Canada and the provincial regulators are having towards what the challenges are that the industry is facing right now. They know that there's a lot of levels of administration. There's issues with overregulation. There's a lot of different people taking a cut of the pie, right? So the bottom line becomes, very, very diminished for a lot of, especially the smaller producers, but even the larger ones. Of course, they have bloated costs as well, right? So I think this is signaling that the regulators are listening and that they're trying to help in some ways to alleviate at least of the regulatory burden, and hopefully that's going to continue in terms of the trend. I mean, I think that it would definitely be a challenge now for OCS to manage a lot of these new incoming applications that they'll have and all of the other boards, but I would assume that they may have had some conversation, even potentially, with the federal regulators, although they don't necessarily talk too much, from my understanding. But there has to be some way to support it through the infrastructure. And so, if they can't support it, then the provinces will be forced to find ways to do that. Whether that means reducing the oversight that the provincial distributors have, and maybe allowing for privatization moving forward. Who knows? I mean, all speculation, but these are good things. This points to them listening. I know personally, I spoke to a few regulators that were passing through at the Lift Expo, for example. I mean, they never announced themselves too much, but they're just kind of walking through, and they keep a low profile. But I asked them, what's your purpose here? Like, what are you looking to hear about? And they said that they were, without giving too much, they said that they were aware of the challenges that are faced right now and seeing where there might be ways for improvement in the future potentially.
Part of it is about addressing challenges that the industry is facing. Part of it is about getting more products to consumers, but it also seems, especially with the burden to get even a processing license, then another burden to get a sales license. Like, I wonder if it's just like there was just too many layers of regulation, and the impact of the effect of that regulation was not even as intended, right? There weren't people, it was just time and money. It wasn't like there are people reached the threshold for a process and it didn't reach for sales, although there may have been, but like, by and large, the players that are getting the licensing, the big licenses from Health Canada, are actually able to sell product and do it safely and do it effectively, and all the rigor that comes with the process that's already in place. And I guess you mentioned this, but like Health Canada, all the regulations you talked about changing or loosening by and large, including equivalencies for beverages, including the processing license to sales license sort of streamline, and what's happening on the provincial level, both in Ontario with the flow through program, but also with the white label that's gone back and forth, but retailers be able to white label. We see that also in Alberta with I think it's like the cut red tape, blah, blah, blah. But now the private retailers are allowed to deliver and offer e-commerce, and the province is getting out of it. Like, I don't know if we're talking like, is this a watershed moment? But there are big differences now than there weren't before. And this has all happened within the span of a couple months. And it seems to be that regulators on the provincial and the federal level understand what we've known for some time, is that the world it didn't come crashing down with legalization, and that the loosening will also not cause the sky to fall. And like, I wonder, I don't want to project what is next, but as you're saying, like, these are good steps. These are positive steps. Consumers, retailers, producers, like up and down the supply chain, these are good moves.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think it's hard to always know, where these decisions come from. Obviously, regulators work within a black box. You don't really know until they just spit something out at the end. And sometimes it's positive and sometimes it's not. Right now, we're getting a lot of positivity, but I imagine, like, with working with Health Canada for a few years, you can kind of notice some trends and within the industry. And so they don't necessarily, for example, right now there's a lot of mergers and acquisitions that are going on in the industry, right? That's no secret. But Health Canada isn't necessarily trained to manage what those types of transitions are. They didn't really have a good program for analyzing these things, and now they're getting inundated with more of them. And so potentially that is also a factor in them saying, like, hey, this is not how we wanted the industry to go. We want people to be able to have a successful business and not have to do these kinds of regulatory feats of changing and modifying licenses and things like that. So perhaps there's ways that we can make this a little bit easier. So, and the same thing comes with the provinces, and it often comes from results based, and it's reactionary, and that's okay. You can't really know. I mean, the regulators are always going to take a safety first approach, and that's what they did. And as we had predicted, years back, that regulations start tight and then they loosen. And so this is hopefully a sign that it's moving towards that direction. I'm hoping that they're going to have some additional changes with, the upcoming Cannabis Act review that, will lead to changes even in, like, the taxation, for example. Like, that's a huge one that's really impacting folks. But we're hearing about New Brunswick moving into a more privatized model, and some of the other provinces and some of the bigger ones, like you mentioned, Alberta, moving into sort of like a semi-privatized model there. So that's all positive, I think. And the less government overreach that we necessarily have, I think it'll be easier to have a very stable and prosperous market as we move forward.
I like the sound of that, Dario. It's by the way, a lot of these changes have come since you started growing a mustache. So I mean, you're going to have to keep it if you want the regulations going the right way. I don't know if anybody's brought that up, but it might be a good luck charm.
Hey man, like you have a lot of real estate there that you can join me as well. So
That's true. I could just bring it down to the Dario is what we'll
Yeah,
start
there you
calling it. Dario, I do enjoy hearing. Thank you for the update on what's happening specifically around Health Canada, because I think that is super critical to nearly everybody, and getting some insight there. Want you to promise to come back the next big announcements that come from Health Canada. And until then, thank you for making time. Thank you for being our expert today. And we look forward to connect with you down the road.
Thanks so much for having me, Jay, as always. Talk to you next
Got it.
time. Cheers.
Good work. That was BFC Live. If you like this program, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also find us wherever you find your podcasts. We're able to do what we do because of ongoing partnerships with Alterna Savings, Cannabis at Work, Cannabis Benchmark, Can Delta, Gallagher, Headset, and Torque and Mains. Find out all that we do at businessofcannabis.com.